Okay. Now it's recording.
Just lots of pictures around too.
Literally like a time lapse of the debate.
Is everybody ready? Beginning time now. Again, congratulations to my opponents for coming this far. Thank you for joining the round. Thank you everybody for being here, watching this round. Thank you to my partner for covering the case. Just going to the top of the case, then framework, then plan text, then two advantages. So top of the case, the resolution handed us today is the United States federal government should eliminate the Defense Logistics Agency's 1033 program. We see all the definitions in today's round are purely defined in the resolution. They're pretty contextual. The use of the word should implies to call to action, meaning this will be a policy round judged on the standard of net benefits. Whichever advocacy can prove to you that they provide the most net benefits for the most amount of people should win today's debate. On to the framework. One, fiat is an act of imagination that's necessary to allow both teams access to debate. Any other framework denies reciprocity and should be rejected. Two, the affirmative has the right to define the resolution reasonably through the use of parametrics because they have the burden to prove the resolution true. Op must negate the affirmative interpretation of the resolution. Three, policy net benefits is the best criterion for debate as it allows both teams access to predictable burdens and methods of refutation. Four, discursive implications can be weighed in this round if the criticism is a direct result of the plan's passage. Five, due to the fact that all words have a multiplicity of meanings, unless the affirmative's interpretation is shown to exclude the neg, an alternative must be rejected to avoid silencing the PMC. Six, if the PMC is silenced through competing interpretations or framework shifts, the impacts are more immediate and must be paramount over the PMC discursive errors. Yes?
Or are you making arguments against critiques right now?
It's basically a spike because you guys have run critiques in every single other one of your rounds.
Okay, so spike, preemptive logic. All right.
If you want to call it that.
Okay.
With that, the plan. Anyways, the plan text is pretty. You guys can guess the plan text. The plan text is the United States federal government, through an act of Congress, as soon as possible, using normal means as their funding mechanism, with the Department of Defense as their enforcer, will eliminate DoD Program 1033. Basically, again, this is just the program that supplies military weapons to the police. So with that, on to two advantages. One is of saving lives, which is unique to subpoint 1. Over 5,000 civilians have been killed by local police since 9/11. Subpoint 2, it is estimated that you are 8 times more likely to be killed by local police, than by an act of terrorism or by a terrorist themselves. 3, in 2013, 80,000 military-style police raids were conducted. 4, an example of this military-style police raid is on May 30th, 2014 in Georgia. A police officer threw a flashbang grenade into a baby's crib on a drug raid, leaving the baby in a coma with third-degree burns. In a coma with third-degree burns, basically showing their logic was, this is a drug, but we need to use military tactics. We need to have some sort of offensive, and in doing this, they induced this harm. Fifth, the reason why they're doing this is basically because of the contract which they're binding into. This contract basically states that they have to use these military-style weapons within 12 to 18 months, or else they are revoked, or else they're sent back to the military themselves. So basically in the status quo, they have a need to use these weapons, so they are using these weapons, causing these deaths. Link plan passes, we eliminate this program. Internal link 1, we remove the weapons. Internal link 2, police can't overuse these weapons in these circumstances. Internal link 3, basically no weapons, no trainings. Basically, if you don't have the weapons, the specific training applies to these weapons only. If you don't have this military training that's applying specifically to this military weapons, you don't have this military mindset when you're going in on these raids. Impact 1, we see less death. Impact 2, basically less death because again, we're decreasing the weapons. We're decreasing the fact that they actually need to use these weapons to shoot people in order to keep these weapons, which is obviously an impact that we're garnering because life should be valued above all else in this round. 2, what you're going to see is a decreased fear of police and a better quality of life because right now in the status quo we are scared of the police coming in doing these things. But again, by not fearing the police because we're passing this, we're going to reduce stress. We're going to reduce the anxiety of the general population. So with that, yes.
Also decrease the violence of the military mindset.
My bad. Decrease the violence of the military mindset as an impact, as I did bring it up in my uniqueness and links. So advantage 2, yes.
Once again, let's go back to your spikes. What would happen if we don't meet your spikes? Will you theory against us?
Lose the ballot.
Yeah.
We lose a ballot, so the ballot is something you're threatening us with. All right.
Okay. Continuing on further, the advantage 2 is basically of the warrior games, which is just basically an extension on this, but unique to some point 1, Sarasota police get less than 1 hour each year in heavy firearms training, according to the Herald Tribune. Subpoint 2, according Oh, sorry, I thought you said no. Subpoint 2. Basically, what the Hoover Institute study has shown is that the lower the training the police are getting, the more increase in police shootings are happening, and the more increase in general shootings that are happening. Subpoint 3. Basically, in the status quo, where we're seeing the reason why this is happening is because this concept of threat construction. That when the police comes in having this military-style equipment, that they're underused, that the public knows that that they have not been trained to use. What you see is that it basically increases any previous tensions. This specifically applies in terms of riots, where in a riot, where normally people would be peacefully acting, instead they see this perceived threat of the police coming in as an act against them, and instead they basically ramp up this escalation, leading to an escalation in tensions and violence caused from these what should be peaceful, riots, or not riots, protests. Riots are the violent one, protests are the non-violent one. Link plan passes internal link 1, again we remove the weapons. Internal link 2, we decrease threat construction because now the military does not come in full facades and full military gear. Basically by decreasing the threat construction, again this isn't just theoretically, they don't have the military gear, they don't appear as threatening. Perceptual link here also that the public sees that because they don't have access to this military style training, they also decreases the threat construction. Internal link 3, no weapons, no training on this military mindset, and this mindset that it's us versus them, that it's us with these military weapons versus them. The regular general population impacts. 1, we see again a decrease in death, specifically in this riot situation, but also in the just all around situation. Impact 2, we see an increase in peaceful riots because now the people are not scared of this threat construction. Now these people can go outside and protest what they legitimately believe in, increasing like the democracy, not increasing democracy, my bad, that was a bad impact. Basically, they can now riot peacefully to try to change the government for which they should be able to shape. Impact 3, again, they're not using this military style. Basically mean they're perceived more as a friend of the people, not as this threat to the general population, not us versus them mentality, which this training specifically gives them. So just in the end, what you're seeing is that we're decreasing death, we're increasing peaceful riot, or increasing peaceful protests. We're taking away this military edge and this threat construction that the police has right now. So for all these reasons, there's a strong vote in the affirmation of today's debate. Thank you.
Two off case. So according to IV, you should have 4 pieces of paper for the second off.
I'm gonna pull this picture down to just leave time.
Yeah. But there's another off before that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah, of course. Very good.
First off is preempt A interpretation. Affirmers should not be able to use preemptive logic or spikes against the negative and make arguments against what cannot happen in the round. They threaten us with the ballot, the ability for us to, or is that a violation? Some point B violation. The affirmative threaten us with the ballot to tell us that we are not able to do this. Affirmers fail to say that we have to be in a policy and ultimately concede that they're in cross-examination. These are functioning as strikes. Now stranders. First, prep time. 20 minutes of our neg prep was literally wasted. We cannot read a lot of arguments because they simply spike at it. Justify is literally 6 minutes, 30 minutes, 6 minutes, 30 seconds to spike, and we're not able to. Second argument, discursive. Lebanon says every individual has what he calls alterity. It is his identity, it is their being. It constitutes a person's soul. When we don't recognize the alterity of anyone because we use preemptive logic, we simply believe things about the other without recognizing our argument is that the opposite of the recognition of infinite alterity is totalitarian logic, where we make things out of these people. We believe that they're going to run case. They didn't know we were going to run a case, but somehow their preemptive logic made them believe that we were going to do something. This stereotype, the ability for us to be called the K team, is the problem here, which is really bad because we are not able to do anything. The preemptive logic leads to the loss of our loss to value of life. The demonization of the other is very specific because when they tell you that they are going to be threatening us with the ballot, we're never able to have a proper discussion because they always constitute value of life. This is also the root cause of preemptive logic. I'll give you an example right here. When we went to Iraq, we simply preempted that WMD. If we construct these threats that we might be doing something, sure, we might do it this round. Doesn't mean that they have the right to preempt in the first place. Additionally, the second fold is going to be violence. First, When they say they're threatening us with the ballot, they only use a violent rhetoric. The ability for them to threaten us, that the ability that they could do something if we don't do something, is something that somebody said is always going to culminate into more problems. We are always focusing on threatening ways to find ways that we are able to protect ourselves without actually having the other be important. The second piece of something we talked about, when we consistently use violence to get what we want, we only culminate into more problems. One is extinction for itself, because when we want to fight other people to get what we want, we only cause more problems. Voters, first, fairness. They literally destroy fairness. Alterity is superior to fairness. If they don't recognize it, we don't ever do anything. Additionally, the moment that there's prep skew, which parliamentary is usually 20 minutes, when they're justified this, it's not fair for us. Second of all, fairness is a gateway to education. Education. First, debate is funded because of education. Debate is funded for education purpose. If we're not able to education, there's no reason for us to have it. Third, inclusion. They exclude us out of the round. They could literally 6 minutes and 30 minutes rights. Fourth argument, loss of value to life. That was later a preemptive argument. And yeah.
Could you just reiterate the taglines of your standards?
Prep skew, discursive, and domination or violence. And their shell must be answered by any essential spikes on their case, or is a thing, function thing. That means they don't get access to their spikes arguments unless they respond to the theory argument, because theory is a priori and it's on the spike in itself. Meaning, additionally, their shell is uniquely, our shell is unique, our shell is uniquely, uniquely key to fairness. If their spikes are bad, then you should vote them down, because it's a very bad interpretation for how debate should be. Next off, the K. Let's see this. First, K is a limits test. The team with the best method is questioning the assumptions of one HC should win the debate. Unless the affirmative justifies the fundamental assumptions, you vote negative to endorse peripheral modes of knowledge production. And additionally, the affirmative possesses himself as a master of theoretical powers, able to create new chains. Do you want to see the endorsement of power, explanation, affirmative escape to creativity, imagination? To Conley talks about how when their ability to do that, they're able to create new things by empower positions. They're always able to think that they're able to create things. They're able to create new problems or new structures. Additionally, the one see political position states are justification or passive reaction. The affirmative valorous resistance to capture boredom through activism, where they feel that they're able to change everything. Nietzsche talks about when we think we're in power structures, we are consistently addicted to it. We become addicted to a Deleuze called the strength model of fiat. And when they try, their active power makes them want to do things, and also, the affirmers can always have a particular threat, besides for control. Their domestication of the world, where they believe that there's always going to be a problem, is very bad. It's not about death, but the apparent life of what makes it valuable. Their framework and life makes extinction inevitable. They're suffer for internalized fear. They make life an agile project, feels resentment. They believe that they're able to think that they're able to control the world. Yeah?
Could you repeat that clearly?
The affirmer can always have a particular threat. Like, that's the thesis of the argument. Yeah, you always create threats. Like, this is a problem, that's a problem.
So we always threaten?
Yeah, you always feel there's a threat, yeah. The alternative is to affirm destiny by chance, take risk of exploiting yourself to stimulate useful impacts. Additionally, refuse to engage in the 1AC Speech Act. We don't advocate danger, but in a real world, but in the simulated plane of fiat, with no relation to reality that treats you 1AC or not something to be afraid of. Fiat is fake. They literally make it. It's talking about how it's imaginary. This is only going back to the K. Only look at the balance affect you as an individual. Do you affirm life or pity the concept of living? The alternative is to live eventually through the rolling of the dice. Deleuze 83 talks about when we affirm the rolling the dice, we are always okay with the outcome. We don't go back and say, I want a 3 and roll it again. The questioning of how we affirm the life is through that. And now the question of the alternative is keep developing framework. Evaluate the debate only to competing speech act. Literally, the affirmative burdens to prove the speech act is beneficial to our understanding with the people or the policemen we have. The negative reciprocal burdens to prove a better methodology for how we should interact with it. And the first framing arguments. First, the affirmative justify their assumptions before prior to weighing that fiat is illusory means you evaluate epistemology first. Yeah, fiat may be imaginary. It doesn't make it a good thing in the first place. You should probably weigh because epistemology is all we have literally have in debate. The plan really never matters because they're not able to change anything. That means epistemology, where our representations come first. Additionally, the role of the ballot is to avoid resentment. Resentment is the root cause of all single things. Probably means you should prefer it because we always want to control things. Additionally, yeah.
Avoiding ontology?
Resentment. I don't know what you got ontology. Resentment.
Resentment.
is the idea the way to control the other is the root cause of all the impacts we talked about. Fourth, K comes first. Procedures require the justification. Our K question the value of putting in order to will. The K is the gateway to understand the meaning of life. Let's go to K's.
Literally, I'm just going to text your argument. First of all, they say the fiat doesn't defend restriction, even if they win the argument. First of all, it's bad for education, because even if fiat may be giving us a predictable idea, it doesn't make it a good predictable idea. It's very bad for education. It's fake. They literally tell you that epistemology comes first on this question. Additionally, I think the only impact that I really want to talk about is the direct construction argument. First of all, they don't really solve for this. They literally create more threats with their preemptive logic, where they have to use more arguments for this. They talk about that, and then first of all, we have a better solving round, because if you reject their scholarship of how we read case and stuff like that, or using the spikes, means there's no threat construction. It's really a performer contradiction on their behalf.
Alright, so I am going to go K, then preempt bad, K, framework, preempt bad, case.
The framework is on your case.
Our framework. Ready? Okay, so starting time now. First, let's look at the top of their case. So essentially, they tried to say that K is a litmus test and that you have to vote neg, and this basically seems to be their only alternative within this round. They provided no actual alternative, so it seems that they're defaulting to you have to prefer the negation. So, first of all, framework term. One, the ballot decides what, by using the ballot to decide what's right or not, they're deflecting from community-wide discussions which could be implemented. So instead of just actually talking about this issue, and instead of all the things which could actually be talked about, they're trying to use the ballot as a way to decide what's right or not. So they're actually using the ballot to endorse one ideology over another, which means that that's inherently going to otherize one ideology. So that essentially means that either one or the other is going to be presumed right or not, which means that there's going to be no reason to discuss it, because people will be like, oh, that's already something that's already decided is right. So that's going to actually endorse the one ideology over the other. I'll take your only point, sorry.
Yeah, doesn't your plan do that too? Don't we decide if it's good or not? Isn't that an ideology as well, that your plan is good?
Yes, the plan is good. Okay, I'll get to that more later. So essentially they try to say that also this is going to create things, this is going to create new power struggles. However, this power struggle is already inherent, and additionally, another framework term, they're actually going to lead to groupthink, because the ballot is silencing these new ideas, because it's trying to, the new idea to deviate from the status quo. So essentially, our plan is a way to deviate from the status quo and provide this new alternative to the status quo. We're trying to do something positive and lead to forward progress. However, the ballot is silencing that. It's meaning that this is going to lead to more groupthink, because there's going to be no reason to look to alternatives in the future. It's going to just lead to focusing on the status quo, because it's inherently endorsing the idea that the status quo is better than trying to provide other alternatives, and that we should just be talking about these abstract ideas rather than actually trying to focus on concrete impacts and things which can actually be benefited. So then basically they try to say all of this stuff about how activism is lead to thinking and changing everything. They don't really clarify that until then. They say that we are always creating a threat. So basically they're trying to say that we're always creating a threat. However, first of all, we're actually able to prove that we are going to decrease threat construction. They didn't really have any solid refutation to this on our case. So you can see that you can actually flow through our threat construction points, and you can see that we actually are going to solve for this threat construction, because we're decreasing threat construction in the real world, not just in this round, which is, yes, high school debaters, but we're actually solving for the real world. We're solving for the entire United States, because we're going to actually lead to this solid impact. Also, threat construction is constant in society. Yes, it's bad, but it's not something that the affirmation uniquely solves. Creates. We're not the ones who are actually making threat construction. It's a thing that exists, and we can't be expected to solve for all of the harms which are presented in the status quo. Yes, we can try to solve for some things, but we can't solve for everything in the limited time of a debate round. We have literally less than 40 minutes to talk about all of these issues, and trying to force us to talk about all of these huge issues beyond just what's actually in the resolution means that we're inherently skewed out of a lot of ground. So then they try to say that the ballot is the way to check literature in that something about living in the roll of the dice. I'm sorry, I tried to clarify this, but I didn't really get much clarification on this. And they said that basically that we're affirming life through the roll of the dice. Okay, that doesn't really mean much in this round, but basically what you can see is that all of our other framework responses respond to this. And then they try to say that the link is that we must improve the Speech Act. Okay, so the affirmation is actually improving the Speech Act because we're actually having an argument about something that's actually going to have a positive benefit in the actual real world. So we're talking about something that, yes, it's happening through FIA, but it's going to actually discuss an idea which could, if it were to happen, and if this idea is perpetuated in the real world because we're having this debate around and because it's in fact being recorded, that means this idea is going to get out there that this should happen, and because it's going to get out there that this should happen, that's going to lead to increased thought on this idea. So then they basically try to say that this is going, epistemology has to be first. They don't really clarify why this is specifically true, and they try to say that we have to avoid controlling others, but they don't actually specify how we are specifically and uniquely linking to controlling others in this otherization. And also you can turn, sorry, their framework got really confusing in here, but they basically, so on their links, you can actually turn the links because first of all, the plan ensures the ethic of human rights, meaning we already reorient ourselves to help people and to solve problems in the international community, and this is a springboard for future action to recognize these issues. Additionally, you can then see that they don't really have any alternative, but they're just saying to vote for the negation. However, we can perm this. There's no reason you can't vote for the negation in this instance and then follow what they're trying to advocate for in every other instance besides this. So basically what you see is that we would do the plan to deconstruct the status quo. So to solvency, the critique is inherently parasitic. The plan must be enacted for the alt to function. People realize that the plan is bad, so this will supercharge the movement and alternative. So doing plan basically shows how bad the plan is in their world. So essentially, net benefits to the perm is one acts as a Trojan horse. Perm utilizes policy structure to get in and destroy from within. The warrant for this is that working within the system always solves back, and the Occupy movement proved that critique outside the system will always fail. To coalition building, to Hegelian dialectics. So basically you can look to Hegel, who said that you have to have the thesis and antithesis in order to create any sort of solvency. You have to have the thesis and antithesis and combine the two things in order to have any solvency in the long term and to have any positive benefits. So basically what we see is that in order to have any sort of benefits, you have to look to combining the two things. And additionally, 5, historical double bind. Either the alt is strong enough to solve, strong enough to overcome the residuals of the plan, or it's too weak to overcome the status quo. So then looking at the solvency term, by disengaging from policy framework, they're fostering political antipathy, and which is responsible for the terrible policies of the United States and non-representative government and low voter turnout, which leads to increased sexism and racism in our government because youth are coming out to vote. We're stuck in the status quo, we're stuck in this conservatism, which doesn't actually lead for any positive benefits. So then let's look at framework. So basically they tried to say that the plan does not happen because fiat is just an imagination thing. Okay, yes, it's imagination, but we've shown you how we're actually going to have this positive benefit because this is going to get out there. It's recorded. It's the final round at NPDI. It's going to get out there, and the word is going to get out there, and that's going to lead to actual positive benefits. But also they failed to respond to the fact that policy net benefits is the best criterion for this round and all these things. So essentially on the preempt, basically they tried to say that we shouldn't get to preempt. However, they literally did not provide any real reason why we shouldn't. So essentially our counter-interpretation is that yes, we should be able to preempt because there's literally no other way that we would be able to run anything much against this K. So then basically on the standard, they said prep time skew, but they still argued all of their arguments, so there's no demonstrated abuse here. They literally have shown you nothing about why their prep time is actually skewed. And then they said discursive implications, there's ulterior of otherization, but we've already shown you how we're actually not otherizing, they're otherizing us by making it so that there's always going to be one other or another, and they're making it so that we are otherized in this round. And also they said this leads to violence, but actually they're talking about losing the ballot or gaining the ballot. So this idea of loss or gain, it's just something that exists, it's going to happen, and we're not actually causing this, so you have to write this off. So for all these reasons, you can extend the affirmation case, and I strongly urge an affirmative ballot. Thank you.
Okay, so order is going to be K, then their counterinter, and then our inter.
Can you give me 1 second? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, yeah, so it's going to be K, counterinterp, interp, and then K sub I.
So case theory, case theory, case.
Everyone ready? Be all good. First on the K. Concede the perm do both. The K is conditional. We're not going for it. It means we don't link into all of the framework often because we defend the status quo, and so we don't link to any of their often there. Now onto their counterinterp. Their counterinterpretation is literally that they can preempt. This is a terrible interpretation for debate. Now, first, you're going to be preferring competing interpretations because reasonability invites judge intervention. There's no reason we should have judge intervention in this round because it's unpredictable for both sides because no one knows how, what exactly is the bright line for what exactly do you want? We don't know what would be reasonable for each judge. There are 5 judges in this room. It's impossible for us to determine reasonability for a judge. And their only argument on preemption, their only argument standard on the counterinterpretation is that we can preempt because, or else how would we answer the K? They're still engaging with the K. They've shown that they can answer the K. There is demonstrated abuse on, their argument on there's no demonstrated abuse is really, really bad because we have shown demonstrated abuse. Specifically, when they extend that preempt, that we should be looking to the policy making that benefits paradigm at the point at which they've extended a preempt from there. That shows demonstrated abuse because that's taking away our ground. Because not only do we have to read our own case, we have to spend time responding to their arguments. And if we don't do that, that's going to completely be skewing over our prep time. And not only does it skew over our time and round because we don't have a fair chance to respond to both their case and then also read our own case as well as respond to all of the preempts that they have, but it also skews over our prep time because it prevents us from running certain arguments. But the real problem that they're doing is they're not responding to our interpretation very well. So go to that now. You can extend our interpretation that the app cannot use preemptive logic against the negative, and specifically in the way of not having any spikes or saying what can and cannot happen in this round. The violation that they've completely conceded is that they are using this type of logic. You shouldn't let them do that.
And threatening us with the ballot.
And they're threatening us with the ballot. And now onto the standards. You can extend our standard of prep times. They're completely skewing over the negative prep time because it's 100% ground loss for us because our prep time is skewed over because all of the 20 minutes that we spent preparing our case, that goes away because they're saying that we can't run our case anymore. They're saying that specific arguments can't be run anymore. You can't let them do this. They're not arguing properly against it. She just says that there's no demonstrated abuse, but if she's extending a preempt against us, if she's extending a preempt against us, that is demonstrated abuse because that's something specifically that we couldn't prepare against. And more importantly, they're not doing a very good job on responding to the discursive standard under the shell. Their only argument against this is that there will always be loss and gain happening in the world, and that's something that's okay to do. But the problem is that it's not responding to the fact that this is the root cause of all loss in the world. This is the root cause of this is going to be the root cause of violence happening in this world. So that's going to be cross-applied to their argument. They're not responding to any of the warrants here. That the violence is caused because we're specifically grouping people into the groups by having this preconditioned notion of what exactly they're going to be running, what exactly they're going to be doing. And when we have that notion, we make assumptions about them. And we make these assumptions and say that they might be doing something bad. We should go in and stop them, even though they might not even have done anything bad at all. So, Iraq, for example. So, extend the discursive turn. Extend the discursive standard. That you can look to the Levinas argument that alterity means alterity of recognizing the other. It has to come before anything else because we have to recognize the differences that people have within themselves, and we can't just categorize them. They're categorizing us into just because we might have run a K against them before. They're categorizing us into preemptively that we're probably going to be running a K in this time. That's not something that they should be allowed to do because that's first of all, I talked about prep times, and second of all, that's going to lead to them inherently grouping up, and that's going to putting us into groups, and that's going to lead to a loss of value to life because we're not being treated as individuals in and of itself. We're being treated as the K team or a group that runs Ks. They're not treating us as people. And we've shown you how preemptive logic is the root cause of loss of value to life, and it's the root cause of other wars. You can look to the Iraq War where George Bush used preemptive logic against Iraq that they were building weapons of mass destruction. And that's something that and we went and stopped him, and that led to loss of life and a lot of death. Now on to the arguments that we were making of why theory comes first.
So violence. What do you use violence? How do you see it?
All right, so extend the second argument, the third standard under the violence. This is leading to violence against us. That violence will be causing extinction, and you can also So let's move on to the arguments as to why exactly this will be coming first in the round. you're not going to be evaluating any of the, you're not going to be evaluating like the framework of like policy net benefits, because theory is going to be an a priori issue. They've conceded that theory is an a priori issue, and this is going to be coming even before any of their spikes in the round. So even if their spikes might apply back to the theory shell, it's not going to be mattering in this round, because this is a meta theory issue, because it determines whether those spikes that they ran are fair, educational, or good or bad or not. And they've completely conceded this argument. At the point at which they've conceded this argument, there's no reason that they would be allowed to win this round. Like, don't let them make new arguments against the shell, because it goes pretty conceded. So it's going to be 100% to our voters of fairness. Yeah, so extend our voters. You can extend the voter of fairness. That fairness is key in the debate round, because otherwise people wouldn't be joining debate, and they'd want to leave debate, and that's not something that you as a judge can promote, people leaving debate, especially when they're talking about all of these like wonderful impacts from having like fiat. If the wonderful impacts of fiat are so true, then you as a judge want people to be staying in debate. Like this is, we're going to be controlling the internal link to all of their arguments, and you can extend the second argument of education. You can specifically extend how debate funding comes from education. So this is going to be going back to the first argument of people will be leaving debate, because schools will stop funding debate. And you can also extend that they're making arguments about how education is important, how we should be talking about issues that are happening in the round, because they can spend elsewhere in the round. If they're not providing good education in this round, then that's a reason you should be voting them down on. And you can extend a third argument of inclusion, how they're going to be excluding people from the round, specifically by not letting them run critical arguments. You can also extend the cross-valid discursive argument that we're making, how their discourse, how their preemptive logic will be excluding people from running arguments, because they're specifically like trying to make assumptions about what people will be running, and if people are being excluded out of debate, like it goes back, you as a judge like don't have jurisdiction to vote for arguments that'll be excluding people out of the round. You're not doing a very good job on gaining any offense on our shell. Like your debate is. They're at a loss on the theory debate. Now let's go quickly on to case. Case arguments.
Go to the framework argument, even if they win theory.
All right, yeah. Let's go quickly to the framework arguments. They're making this argument how the ballot will be silencing new ideas, but the problem is that the fact is that they're using the ballot to silence new ideas with the preemptive logic. This is like the framework arguments that they kind of read on K, but I didn't know where to flow them. But they're making this argument how the ballot is silencing new ideas. Now the problem is that they're going to be silencing our voices using preemptive logic. They're specifically saying that the negative won't be able to run this, the negative can't run this, we can only have this in the round. That's silencing our voices. That's going to be turning their framework against them. So even if you like buy the argument that we are somehow silencing voices, they're doing it more, and they're doing it preemptively, which is infinite times worse.
Alright, it's going to be theory in case. Alright, are we good? Alright. First, because you default to before we make the arguments, you default to compete or to have competing interpretation. You should vote for the interpretation that has the most offense. Multiple reasons why my partner said. First of all, judge intervention is not there because you do not have the ability to say reasonability or what arguments are there in the first place. Problem is that if we're able to win more offense under our interpretation, you should vote for us on that question. Let's go to our interpretation. First of all, external interpretation, the affirmative cannot run preemptive logic with the use of spikes or other arguments like you cannot do things in this way or what you must be doing in the first place. It was a very nuanced interpretation. Actually, the violation, they tell us what we cannot do using preemptive logic, the ability for them to threaten us with the ballot, saying that you will lose the ballot or we will run theory against you, is a problematic structure that allows them to use preemptive logic, which is inherently bad. They have not asked for the definition of preemptive logic, so, I mean, even if they make no violent argument, they have done preemptive logic by telling us what we have to do. Standards. First, time skew is going to be a very important issue in today's debate round. The only argument that she has somehow made, the only argument she made that 20 minutes of arguments has not been wasted, but yes, it has been. If you were justified to, in your interpretation, you were justified to read 6 minutes and 40 or 59 seconds, or even 7 minutes of spikes in the first place. This argument is inherently bad because it only allows us to not have a prepared time for the 20 minutes. Sure, parliamentary has 20 minutes, but it does not okay for you to simply nullify all of that by running preemptions. The other issue was that when they were able to run their preemptions, they had the possibility to nullify all of our offense. Sure, if they had the right preemption, they could have nullified the K offense, which is really bad. The second argument was discursive. Alright, now I know a lot of you may not be used to critical standards, but here's how I was doing with them. First, Levinas talks about how every individual has what he calls alterity. It is their identity, their being, that what constitutes a person shall. If we don't recognize the alterity of the individual, we result to totalitarian logic. It is the ability to us to break down, understand, demonize, to understand the notion of the other. The impacts back to this, when we don't recognize them, we start categorizing them, we start feeling that we have to have threat construction among them. When we use this logic, we ultimately lead to endless mechanisms of multiple things. First of all, we lose the value in life because we are not treated as human beings, we're simply treated as a category, something that allows us to be a part of something, something that makes them say that, hey, you are not this person, you are simply this category of stereotyped thing. When they term us as the K team, is also another way that you should vote against them because they only demonize the other in this question. We lose our vital life because if people are always justified people are always justified to be like, hey, you were this person, we really don't have the ability to do anything in the first place. Second argument was that this was the root cause of literally preemptive logic. The war in Iraq was a very good example. Their ability for them to say stuff like, when George Bush went to Iraq, he literally was like, they had WMDs, and what did they have? Not WMDs. When we went to them, we used preemptive logic of threat construction to believe that these threat construction were going to be them. This is key. Second argument was the other stand was violence. Easy place for you to vote up. First, they use violent rhetoric. The violent rhetoric, they believe that they will threaten us with the valid threatening of the understanding of what we can and cannot do, what the valid threatening is only be problematic. Sami talked about the analysis was that when we use violence, we cultivate into more problems. These problems can cultivate into problems like extinction, where you feel that the only way to get what you want is to have through violence. This is the argument that we're talking about. Voters, first, fairness is going to be a very important impact. I'll unpack all of our arguments right here. First of all, time skew. It's not fair for them to simply talk about arguments that do not matter, to talk about arguments that don't have a relation to debate. Second argument was the discursive argument. If we're not able to recognize the alterity of the other, it's not ever fair for the other, which is probably bad. The third argument was the violence argument. Was if we're violent to the other, if we're violent to people, it's never going to be fair because we're always going to make them do things if we want it. Second argument was the second voter was education. First, time skew. It's not educational for us to waste 20 minutes of our prep time, so it's not going to be good. Second, argument, discursive. If we're not even recognizing the other has no potential for education. This means that fairness is the gateway to education. Additionally, violence. If we're going to be always violent, we're not going to be promoting educational rhetoric because we're always going to be focusing on bad things in the first place. Third argument, inclusion. They can see that the third argument was inclusion. They exclude us from the discussion. First of all, time skew only excludes us from parliamentary debate because we don't have anything argument to say. Second of all, when we don't recognize the alterity of the other, we don't really have an inclusive method of debate. Additionally, the violence argument, when we're always violent, we're never including people. Most important thing, because you are an educator, you should not vote for that. Now, our show must be answered first because their framing doesn't really matter because you will always be valuing argument first. Now, their counter-interpretation. They say we should use preemptive logic, and they talk about there's no demonstrated abuse. My parliamentary should use demonstrated abuse when they extended their framework arguments, which is probably very bad because it only relied on the foundation that it was a spike that they used against us. Additionally, that was the only standard they have. It only functions as somewhat of a defensive argument on our case, so they only have a unique offense why preemptive logic is inherently good. It means that you should evaluate our arguments first. It's an a priori issue, meaning that even if they're able to win any framework argument or turns on like their substance abilities, they don't really win the round because you should be voting on the a priori issue. They've also seen that, and the next thing on the argument, you are an educator, therefore you should not be excluding people from discussions like this.
It's function on a higher level than
Oh, it functions on a higher level than their framework argument, so it means you should evaluate it first.
Starting time down again. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody for making this debate possible. With that, I'm going to jump right in. First of all, I just want to weigh like the arguments today around what you're going to be voting. If you believe that the spike is valid, that we should be able to like, if policy net benefits is the judging criterion, that we have to use this before the theory, you're going to be voting us. If you're going to be signing your ballot right away, because again, you're going to extend through all of our impacts. But you see that the only affluence they have in today's round is this theory shell which I'm going to bring up a counter theory shell right now. Basically, when they kicked their critique in their second MO speech, this is my first opportunity to respond to it. As such, I will be running it. So this is the conditional bad theory. Subpoint A, violation. Critique should not be conditional. Subpoint B, they made it conditional in their second speech. Standard. Subpoint 1, prep time skew. They literally skew us out of the framework arguments. They skew us out of the, basically, what we did is she literally spent 5.5 minutes out of her speech on this argument, and we basically wasted all the time in her speech. Also, they dropped the K not because of the perm, but because they dropped the K because of the perm, not because of the framework. So you still have to be flowing through all of the frameworks that we have in terms of that you should be valuing our impacts first.
Point of clarification: argument was not conditional on the 2 NC. It was always conditional. You did not ask, so we couldn't really tell it to you.
No points of clarification.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, points of clarification are not allowed in parliamentary debate, so I will be continuing with this. 2-second voter ground skew. We lose all access to all the ground that we had on the K, and we lose all access to all the offense that we had actually put on the K with the turns. We lose access to all of this ground because they literally just kicked it. They literally just made us waste mostly 3/4 of the debate. Again, basically, we put offense on the K. They just dropped all of our offense because they knew they were not going to be able to win on that. Again, showing this violation in their sense. 3 is my third third standard is basically of infinite regression, which is basically that if you allow this to perpetuate, what we're going to see is that the net can just come up here and they can literally want 20 CPs. There's no bright line as to when they can stop invading our ground, when they can stop making us waste all of our prep time, waste all of our speeches, trying to refute these conditional things, when clearly we have no time to refute all of this, when clearly they can literally win as many as they want, and under their logic it would be okay. So D, voters. 1 time sec. They literally, again, they wasted 5.5 minutes of our MG speech. They decreased the educational value of this round because again, we could have learned more about the K theory. We could have gone more into the philosophies of each philosophy. We could have debated this, but instead they just kick it, which again decreases the access to education. Because look, we are literally on live cam right now. The education that could be had in this round is not only harming this debate right here, but it's affecting the people who are going to watch this round in the future online. 2, again, education, just cross-apply everything that I just said. 3, I just want to make this sure, this is an a priori issue because this literally was most of the debate. The K was most of the debate, and again, we wasted our entire speech. So even if you believe that theory should come before pre-fiat, if you believe that theory should come before net benefits, then you're still going to be voting with us because of this conditionality. Bad. I forget to address anything on this. I'm good. I mean, voter 2 was just impacts, basically how if you're valuing this on net benefits, you're going to be voting for us because again, just flow through all of our impacts of decreased death, decreased fear of police, increased quality of life, decreased stress, increased peaceful protests. Basically, the police are going to become a friend of the people. And when you look into the logic of today's one, we actually decrease threat construction. So if you're voting on this, you're going to be voting for the affirmation. With that, on to the third and final voter, which is of turns. First of all, the term that they dropped. Number 1, on their use of the K, they disengaged from the policy framework, which basically means they fostered political antipathy, which my partner brought up, which they failed to capitalize on. So you're going to be flowing that through. 2, they deflect from community-wide discussions, which can solve. Basically, mean they have no time spent on case. It means they have no access to their arguments. 3, did I say that right?
Sure.
Okay. Anyways, unimportant. 3, preempt. Basically, what they did, can you explain this one to me?
Okay, so basically they're authorizing us, which perpetuates all the problems of the acquisition because they're increasing the violence rate here right now, and they said that in
Yeah, again, just cross-apply what she, just flow through what she said before because they did not touch on that one. All that she just said in my speech and all that she said before in our second affirmation speak. For the turns on basically the group thing, the turn on the K, they basically have the balanced sciences, new ideas, and potential for solvency, which outweighs any education and fairness that might be harmed by the affirmation plan. I also did say that right, correct? Yes.
Yeah. Also, even if they drop the K, the discursive implications of all the things which they said still apply. So that's why these terms still apply.
The discursive implications still apply. Paraphrasing what she said. So again, when you're looking on the flow judge, we win on theory with our show. We win on net benefits if you prioritize on this. Because again, we did not win because we threatened with the ballot. So basically, can you explain this one to me?
We did not threaten with the ballot. We said that they could lose the ballot, but they still have to argue it. They still have the right to argue.
So we didn't say we didn't threaten with the ballot. We said that they would lose the ballot. So just flow that through. Again, for all the opinions, you should be having a strong vote in the affirmation. Thank you.